Good morning. Happy New Year. This is Talking Devils, your favourite Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by Manchester United legend Paul Parker to talk over the Christmas period at Manchester United and the New Year's early game against Wolverhampton Wanderers tonight. Before we begin, Paul, how are you doing? How was your Christmas?
All right, not too bad. Just got on with it really. I think like most people, didn't really jump around as such. As I mentioned to yourself personally, I think a lot has been taken away from people, and it's a hard system to get back into at the moment.
Yeah. Were you on Santa's good list or his naughty list?
I think I'm reasonably good, to be honest.
You are. If you're watching live, please like and subscribe. If you're watching on the replay, do that anyway. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to get your questions in. If you're watching the replay as well, say hello. We still comment on the replies and comments that we get. And yeah, thank you for your support. Obviously, Paul and I have been doing this podcast now for coming up to 3 years, and first of all, it's a privilege for me as I often bore Paul with messages to gush about how amazing I love doing the podcast with Paul and how grateful I am for his time. But over the last year, seems to have been quite popular, and we were ranked by FeedSpot as the number one independent Manchester United podcast of 2021, technically number 2 overall. So I'm very proud of that. I'm looking forward to even better 2022. And that'll be the hope for United, Paul. We'll talk over these Christmas games because it has been a mixed period. Newcastle, first of all, they've been trying this new shape. You know, it was obviously, I don't know really how you describe this because we had a few days off, plenty of time to sort of get used to this shape, and the performance was flat as anything. Another game, I mean, we've played Newcastle and Norwich, two of the bottom teams in the league, two of the worst teams in the league, and been quite fortunate to get away with 4 points, really, and that was the case at St James's Park. Again, De Gea, the man of the match, probably. And considering we had all the players available, very flat performance at Newcastle, wasn't it?
It was, to be honest, and generally for Newcastle, it's a big game. They treat that game as a really big game. The fans get behind them, and and United go there. They know there's going to be a battle, but on a few occasions they've gone there and they've won quite comfortably in good games. Lost one, which they kept using, didn't they, all the time to fill up our bad goal. They kept showing that, digging back years
Yeah.
and years to try to remember some of the bright spots of Newcastle against Manchester United. So I expected United to lift and things to roll on. And what you saw really was what everyone I think, has been kind of expecting, but kind of got used to, is a team that is still hasn't really found a level yet, hasn't found a platform to play from in this moment in time. People are still playing like they don't know each other. There's nothing there. There's still not. I mean, there's a formation which gets put up on TV, but it doesn't mean anything really because no one's really working it. It doesn't look like it. Southampton have been doing that same system for years and years, and Southampton have been steady up or down to a point. So you say to yourself, is it working for Southampton in a certain way? Formations are only as good as the players who are actually playing on the pitch. The system, you put it down on paper, and I go to games, and you put it on paper, you look at it, and you say to yourself, that just looks like a thin house with a roof on the top. It's an arrow. It's rubbish. It's not Manchester United playing that system, but is it because the players who are playing at the moment are not the players that he can play it with? And I think if anything, you've got a kid in the kindergarten who's got different shapes to put into holes. After a while, that kid will realise doesn't matter how much it looks like that shape, it's not actually that shape, so it's not going to go in. So they will try and find a way of getting around it and getting it in there. And that's only going to happen if and when he spends money, because the players he's got, they're not up to it. What he's looking for, I need to really to maybe I should sit down and watch a bit of Leipzig really and see how they play and get an idea on how it works really.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at United and you can move it around and the players, Sancho I thought was stepping forward. He seems to have digressed now. It's just I don't know. I look at Ronaldo and if he doesn't score a goal, you say to yourself, what are you getting from him? He's dropping into midfield. He's meant to be a centre forward, and it's not working. You don't want Ronaldo in that midfield. You want someone which United haven't got. You want a player on the ball who's going to create. Um, you want Cavani to get a run of games to get his mojo back because that's what he needs. Forget about his age. Think about him as a player. Um, so I've gone on a bit there really, but there's all little bits what I think every United fan can say and wants to say about the way they're playing. At the moment, United are living off of reputation. Reputation is getting United through certain situations. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, individuals are getting them through as well. The team is just plodding.
Yeah, plodding's a good word for this season. We do have a question in from Victoria's Secrets regarding transfers and stuff like that, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I'm just flagging it now to let you know that I'll come back to it. So let's talk about Burnley then, because obviously in that game there was a change of shape, which was necessitated by the suspension to Fernandes. So he played 4-2-4. I said 4-2-4, 4-4-2 really, but the reason why I'm saying 4-2-4 is when the ball was out of play, from where we were sat in Old Trafford anyway, you could see that when the ball was out of play, Sancho and Greenwood were pushing high on the fullback. So it looked sometimes like a 4-2-4. Maybe it's because they're naturally forward, or maybe they were told to do that. I mean, I'm talking from the dead plays, obviously, when the ball was out of play. Because obviously when it was in play, they were dropping deeper. There was nothing particularly groundbreaking in that. You wouldn't say that there was a high press during the game. You mentioned the individuals thing, and yeah, I mean, you probably put the goals down to that. McTominay getting his shot away, which fell kindly, basically, because Ronaldo, I mean, he's generously going to be attributed with an assist for that, but he's trying to fix his feet to shoot, you can tell. And the ball rolls for McTominay, he scores. But from then on, obviously, it changes the shape of the game because Burnley are very much a pragmatic team, but they had to come out and try and attack, and that left the spaces for United to score the goals that they did. Don't get me wrong. I mean, United winning 3-1, I'm not going to turn my nose up at that. It's as comfortable as we've been for a long time, but it wasn't achieved in the fashion we were led to believe this new style of football is going to be. And by the way, anyone listening to this or watching this is going to probably think that we're getting on the manager's back. I'm really not. I'm looking at the players, really, because I looked at them at the Newcastle game, Paul, and my initial response to what I saw was they've found an excuse, those players, because the excuse is the system doesn't work for them, so they're just not, they can not work. No, I'm saying they're not working, they obviously are, but they've got a ready-made excuse for them, and this is a group of players who, unfortunately, history tells us that when there's an excuse offered to them, they'll take it. They don't have to perform and kick on. That's why they're the biggest reason. You can blame Solskjaer, you can blame Mourinho, but by and large, the players have got to take a lot of responsibility, Paul. You've said it many times, how frustrated you've been about the reaction to poor results and poor performances, that they don't seem to show accountability for it. And, all this will go again kind of nonsense, which is fine. If you're bruising after a particularly rough defeat, then say that, fine. We didn't want to hear it, don't get me wrong, but if there's a time to say something like that, then fair enough. But you can't not turn up against Norwich and Newcastle like we did and then just say, oh, we'll go again. You've got to show better, even with this accounting for a change of system. That should be the opportunity. And we were saying this all along, or my suspicion was the thing that was keeping Solskjaer in a job was the fixture list, because you wanted it to be more generous to who was coming in. And it has been more generous, even more generous because the Brighton and Brentford games were postponed. So he's had an easier run of games. And we've not seen anything from the players. They just haven't stepped up. And against Burnley, yes, we scored 3 times, but it wasn't. The first half was fine. Okay, you're not going to, like I said, not going to turn your nose up at 3 goals, Paul. But it's worrying that he's just not seen a response from the players. Normally, I don't want to be a club that has new manager bounce, really, because of what that implies and the trend that it says. But you still want to see something more. There were complaints that there was a rumor that they were complaining about 5 o'clock training sessions. It's mad. I mean, they've got to expect a change. They've got to expect responsibility. And I've ranted on a little bit there, Paul, but to bring it back to Burnley, obviously they changed the shape. They went with wider players. It looked a little bit more entertaining for a little while. And then, if I'm going to be generous about the performance, I would say that they controlled the second half in a way that we haven't seen United control the second half. But even winning 3-1 wasn't particularly impressive, was it?
No, it wasn't. But just go back, just to go back a minute of what the time you spent there, just the latter bit. If someone said to me, I think we all used to moan that we had to train late afternoon on a Christmas day to then travel to a game.
Yeah.
We had to do that. We'd turn up at Old Trafford, train at Old Trafford, then we'd park our cars just underneath the tunnel, the Munich tunnel. We'd park inside underneath the ground, which is just underneath the K stand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd park around there, and we'd moan. But the thing about it, we would moan, but it wouldn't be out there public knowledge.
Yeah.
We wouldn't, none of us wanted to do that. No one wants to go to work at 5 o'clock. I'm going into a studio tonight to go and do the game this evening. I don't want to be leaving here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd rather be going, if the game's on, I'd rather be going early in the morning, so I'm kind of feeling bright and fresh. The longer the day goes on, you feel like you're being sacked.
Yeah.
And I think that's that mentality, but that's the worrying thing that it's got out. They mostly didn't want to, which is going to be human's nature, because if someone's jumping around going, I can't wait for training, you're going to slap him around the head and say, wake up. But no, that's the worrying thing for me, is things like that are getting out. So that worries me about today's footballers, is that they want to talk too much. They think they've got friends and their friends are talking for them, because all these kind of wannabe journalists are getting involved and around friends, or and then what their friends, as the friends of the footballer, are saying to them, that they're deciding they want to put it online because they think it's great. Look, I know I've got a source kind of thing. So we're in that world really where the long and short would be going back to the days of, say, Jack Regan. There's a lot of grasses out there, to be perfectly honest, and who just can't help but want to talk about footballers because it makes them feel better themselves. So in theory, footballers are being used really by people who they thought they could trust, or friends of the footballers are being used by people. So it's shocking that this is coming out. The Burnley, going back to the Burnley game, I was working on the Burnley game, and I sat there, and I had to, in certain ways, I was apologising on air if I was coming across too critical, but I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was, for a team that hadn't played for so long, Burnley, they were a better team with the ball than Manchester United. People throw up stats. Look at the possession United had. I always look what the teams do with possession. I look at how they're shaping up when they've got possession in that midfield. Burnley looked more likely to break down the back four. They didn't have a great threat in front of goal, but every time the centre halves were panicking. Panicked every single time they got on the ball in midfield. Dwight McNeil was causing them problems. They couldn't get anywhere near him. And you look at Burnley midfield, you look at them, how they progressed every time they had the ball and went forward, they were better than Manchester United. Manchester United, as I've said before, I've got one of the poorest midfields in the Premier League. Without a shadow of a doubt. That can't be changed, but it doesn't matter what within that squad, that's not going to change until they go out and spend on at least two midfield players. If he wants to play this, whatever, 2-2 midfield, whatever, he's got to have another two midfield players. And sorry, I'm going to upset people. I really don't care that Scott McTominay had this unbelievable super game against Burnley, where he's had a few strikes at goal. If you look at the game, you look at Burnley's midfield, and you say to yourself, hold on a minute, when you think Jack Cork, you wouldn't put Jack Cork any distance away from Scott McTominay as a footballer. Should Jack Cork play for Manchester United? Everyone would go, of course not. There you are. At this moment in time, United need to get, if they want to get to where they want to be, they need to get at least 2 midfield players.
Yeah. Well,
at least 2 midfield players.
Let me just jump in on that, Paul. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, you make a point that because everyone watching this or listening back will go, well, I thought McTominay had a good game, and he did. He scored a goal and had a couple of shots. One of them led to, I think, Ronaldo's goal as well. But look at the shape of the team in that too. I share your view. I've always said that McTominay and Fred. I don't think that you can challenge for a title with that midfield. The problem is that the backup isn't good enough. I know people talk about Matic and that he's got a penetrative pass, and yeah, fair enough, he does. But I wonder if you spotted the same thing as me, Paul. And it's something that I've noticed when Matic has played, but I've never really known how to articulate it. But Matic has this issue, maybe it's caused by his lack of pace at the moment, but he drifts into the middle of the midfield, which creates a big problem because you've got the other midfielder has got to find a space to play alongside him. Now, it was funny because I was reminded of something that I wrote. We played Arsenal at the start of the year, and Matic and Fred played in the middle of midfield, and Fred was being pulled everywhere, and because of Matic's, his stationary positioning and his lack of pace. So Fred was getting pulled out of position because Matic is in the middle, and Fred's having to do all this body work around him, and that was the same with McTominay and Matic the other night, and we got away with it because Burnley weren't up to much, and perhaps we benefited from them being a bit ring rusty. But that's the problem. That's another problem, not necessarily just McTominay and Fred. Obviously, we know the problem that we've got with Pogba. The problem with Pogba is that he can drop a 4-out. He can drop a stinker of a performance against a Burnley and Newcastle. He can drop one against anyone in the league. He can get caught in possession by a Jack Cork. Anyone, there's no surprise by that. But obviously the concerning point is that if you've got the experience of Matic, which is that's the experience that we've got, he does get pulled into the middle. And maybe it is because he's worried about his lack of pace, so he doesn't want to be too far from one side of the pitch. Is that something that you've noticed, Paul? Is it something that you're worried about? Or do you think that I'm looking at that and thinking, no, he's probably getting a little bit too carried away with that?
Well, it just boils down to it. The long and short bit is the system doesn't suit Matic. He needs someone wide of him, guaranteed to be wide of him to fill that area, because he can't consistently make those moves. He can't do it. You put him in there and you ask him to hold and sit in front. He will sit in front. He will take the ball off the defenders, and he will be able to the one who can make those passes in positive areas to players in midfield or beyond. He can do that. That's his strength. That's what he was doing for Chelsea. So it's there in his locker if you were to go and do it. You look at the age he's at now, his experience and what's in his head. It's it'd be a vast amount in there, but it hasn't been utilised properly, really, in theory, since he's come to Manchester United. No one's really got a consistent. But I think Mourinho got a good bit out of him, which is surprising because Mourinho got rid of him when he was at Chelsea. But Mourinho turns up at United, plays him, and he got a lot out of Matic, which I was surprised, really. And Matic was a very, very good player when he was at Chelsea. No difference to Mata. Mata was exactly the same. Mata, as another player, hasn't been utilised properly since he's been at United. So it's just the whole thing against Burnley just didn't look right. And Burnley, like you said, a team which were ring rusty. They got in that first half when United scored their first goal. I turned around and said words to the effect of, "If I was Burnley, I'd be scratching my head saying, how are we 1-0 down?" And then I'll be looking at my defenders and going, "What have you done? We've had the ball most of the time. We've taken the game forward. You've had hardly anything to do. When you've asked to do something, you failed miserably." When the second one goes in, you would ask the same questions, because they go in. If they go in at 2-0, they're saying, "We don't deserve that, but we got something here." But they end up going down 3-0, and they must have been mesmerised. I personally, maybe I need to see it again. If United were controlling it in the second half, that's not a way a Manchester United or a team of that ilk should control a game of football. It was they've scored a goal. They've got a goal back, but again, they were doing stuff, Burnley, that if it had been Burnley, who maybe have got a few games behind them, then I think it would have been a different story. But they were fortunate that they were playing Burnley that evening, in my opinion. I know it's an easy thing to say, hindsight after, but I think if you really go and watch that game and you take the win out of the way, because Manchester United are not, as I keep saying, are not just about winning, they're about performances. And when you play the likes of Burnley, you beat Burnley by putting the ball in the back of the net, but your performance as well shows a difference in class. The reason why Manchester United are seen up there, the reason why Burnley's and teams like Burnley come to Old Trafford and they come there, generally should be coming there fearful. And, and they come there not expecting to get a lot. And I don't think Sean Dyche was speaking in that his whole thing leading up to it. All he wanted these players to get back in the system again, because they've been hit harder than any other side regarding these games being called off. And they've wanted to play games because the last thing he wants to be doing is sitting down near that bottom with games in hand. Yeah. He doesn't want that because that's false. That is false economy if you're down there. You're kidding yourself. If you think, I've been there when I got relegated when I was at Fulham. We were sitting there with games in hand. One of the few southern sides in the second division. And we end up getting relegated because we've got that game. You don't get them in the end. They suddenly disappear, especially when you hit the low parts. Your head starts going, it disappears. But United should have really been all over them like a rash. They should have controlled that game back to front, movement the ball across the back. Everything should have been right. Top players never showed up. Cavani was struggling. But when I hear the coach talk about that game and he talked about United going forward, I thought to myself, I haven't got all the credentials he's got as a coach. All I've got is somebody who played the game, somebody who's watched a lot of football, and I didn't see what he was seeing to talk about it in that manner. And unless he was, maybe felt that he's had to put on rose-tinted glasses to appease the fans by saying that, then that's the only excuse I can give him for saying that, because the hard-up Manchester United fan, the one who loves the club maybe just as much as his family, even he would say that wasn't great against Burnley. And against like a Wolves, if they perform like that against the Wolves this evening, they won't get 3 points. Yeah. Wolves are better defensively than Burnley. They're more organised. They're not going to score. They're not going to score a lot. They haven't scored a lot of goals. They don't really threaten in that way. But they have got a few quality players who can do something, who can do things more than Burnley. So it's got to be better. I don't know if he's going to change it, thinking that was good enough, he can do it again, but it wasn't. A few players, Sancho has gone from there, the level of the floor has lifted, and we saw glimpses in the games in Europe, and then he got regular games in the Premier League. Against Burnley, he hit the floor. The only time he went past somebody was when he had that shot at goal. It goes in, and the goal gets taken away from him. They give the goal to me, don't they?
Did it? I thought it was Sancho's goal. Oh my god!
I thought the PL gave it to it come through.
They might have done,
because he's come across and stepped with his right foot and must have taken it more inside of the post. But that's the only time I think he went past somebody, and then next time he tried, he failed. So his confidence is up and down. He needs to get comfortable. He needs to be in a comfortable position in the pitch. People want him to take people on. You've got him, the person you want to give the ball to take people on. You want him to become your Andrei Kanchelskis. You want him to become your Ryan Giggs. You want him to become your Lee Sharp. You want him to become your Ronaldo of old. To take people on in wide areas. At the moment, it isn't happening for him. He's not getting that belief just by looking at him in his face.
Yeah. One thing I did notice with Sancho and Greenwood wide the other night, and we've got a question about wide positions up uphill now. Because they're both in phase, they're both players who like to come in and cut in. It's not necessarily easier to defend against, but you're bringing the play up by 20 yards. But if you're an outside winger, you can get to the byline. like we were doing occasionally. That's where we had the greatest joy. We were causing more panic in their defence when Greenwood just bombed on to the byline, or you had touchline, sorry, and the same with Sancho. And yes, they can cut in from that position, but normally they cut in like 35 yards up the pitch, and it's doing nothing because defences can handle it a little bit better. Having said that, I still think there's benefits to playing wide than with the narrow shape. And like I said earlier, the Burnley game gave us the option of doing that without Fernandes. And I don't want to be, critical too much, because obviously Fernandes hasn't been in great form. We can all see that. I still think he's one of the key creative players, and the stats will probably back that up. He still creates a lot of chances, or the best amount of chances for the players around him. But it's without question that, we played well without him the other night. We scored 3 goals without him, and we didn't look like we missed him. I should say that. Victoria's Secrets asked, Paul, I think if both Ronaldo, it's a statement, not a question. If both Ronaldo and Cavani play as a front two, we need to play with wingers to get the very best out of them. Playing with 2 offensive midfielders without wingers dilutes the impact they make. We've said this before, right? You said it probably a week after we had Rangnick in charge, but you were saying the formation doesn't look quite right. It's square pegs, round holes kind of thing. Are we in that position now? I mean, I know you've got to try and find a way to put Fernandes in the team, maybe in the midfield too. I don't know how that works, because I don't know if he's strong enough in possession in a midfield too. But you kind of feel like you've got to play that wide system, because we've got a lot of wide players, right? It seems nonsense to not do it. So it's Rangnick's thing is like, yes, you want to get the methodology across, but there's nothing saying that you can't ask players to press enough in with wide players, right? It's just something you got to do. Horses for courses.
Yeah, I mean, it is that way, and United have always been known about wide players. Sometimes as much as you look at it, nostalgia, it's fantastic, but you can't always believe in it, and you can't always go back to it. But I look at it at the moment, and it doesn't suit the players that he's got to play that system. One thing that Burnley kept doing, which they got a lot of joy from, that they never had the personnel to take it a step further, which a better side will. And if Wolves were watching that game, they were trying to say, hold on a minute here, is the amount of times they switched to play Wolves because United was so narrow. Yeah. They really switched to play, and if they get on either side, and it allows them to then go 1 against the fullback. Now, you look at it and you think to yourself, if you don't want Dalot if he's going to play, going 1 against 1. And then you think the other side, you don't want Luke Shaw 1 against 1. Luke Shaw he looks tired the moment the game kicks off. He just doesn't look, So you don't want, and they kept doing it, but they never really couldn't make a lot of it because they didn't have the personnel. But they earned a lot of areas in wide positions, and they got into the final third quite easily by switching play with with Jack Cork pulling, going right to left, and you think to yourself, wow, they were doing that far too easy because the midfield weren't close enough to them to close it down, and everyone was having to tuck in. Now we talk, when you got a Mason Greenwood and you've got a Sancho, you just want them to deliver balls, and then if you keep delivering balls into that box, that's going to force them back. That's going to create space because they're worried about that. They know 9 times out of 10, Ronaldo's not going to run behind them. Cavani's not really going to run behind them in certain ways if they're that high up. But what happens is that if you keep crossing the ball, Ronaldo will stop coming into midfield.
Yeah.
And he kept coming looking for the ball. That was the biggest problem. He kept doing that, and he was causing problems in the fact of he was coming back to have 1 or 2 touches, slows it down, and then that was allowing Burnley to go back. But if you keep putting the ball in the box, you're forcing the issue and saying, stay in there. And he's going to want to stay in there, because that means the chances of him to score a goal is heightened. Yeah. And he wasn't doing it. Every time you cut inside and you're hoping that somebody can just deliver put a crossing, which is going in towards the defenders, which makes the defenders' favourites coming onto balls. And the only time Ronaldo gets on it, it's a great ball. but that's very few and far between. So sometimes you just need more crosses coming into the box, and United just don't do it. And when you've got the wide players that they've got, even Rashford to a point is a wide player. You don't want him running into cul-de-sacs all the time. So all he's doing is blocking up. It's important that United start asking questions of defences by delivering early balls into the box.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Red Angle makes a comment. I presume Fernandes, because that looks familiar with those numbers. 80-odd goals and assists in 100 games. Yeah, I'm not saying that he's productive, and even in his lean spell of not playing well, I still think he remains one of the most productive players in the team. But we didn't miss him against Burnley. That's the point I was trying to make. And we won the game, and like Paul said, it's presenting this other scenario, which really is one that suits our team or the players in the team better. We've got a lot of wide players, and it's how Rangnick marries that with the philosophies he wants to introduce. He can't say, "Oh, I'm going to play 4-2-2-2," and that's what I'm going to hammer to the players, because even if the formation's good, and even if he's a really good coach for making that work, I don't trust the players enough. I honestly don't. I think that the players will just look at that and say, "Oh well, it doesn't suit us. We've got an out. We've got an easier thing." This is a point made by Mike Pieri, and we have talked about this, Paul, so it might be a bit of a leading question. But Mike says, where he asks, have some players reached a comfort zone of believing they have arrived by simply being at United? Is this compounded by the fact that the club captain is so far removed from the likes of Robson, Keane, Bruce, Cantona in personality and not ability? And it's a very interesting thing. I've written something about this on the website. It was on over the last week or so, and it was talking about that. And you've talked about it before, Paul, and I think that's why it's always been in my mind, that you have a lot of players who arrive at United. And Martial's a really good example of a player who probably is better off not playing for United as long as he stays at United, because people can talk about his ability, hype him up. They can argue the case for his performances, and we don't have to see the reality of them. And you'd rather be a player not playing at Manchester United and picking up the money that you are, rather than a player playing at, for the sake of argument, Sevilla. It's a conundrum for him, because could he go to Sevilla and say, let's say, plays 15 games and scores 7 or 8 goals? The profile that he's got as a player and as a market potential, it exponentially drops. And I don't know if that's the situation that we face with modern footballers, that they prefer to coast somewhere like United because it's easier to do that. And if you think that that's the case, if that sounds like it's a fair argument, then you've got 7 or 8 players like that at United. That's very, very worrying. Is that a case, do you think, Paul? I mean, that Micah Richards, he said something about this a few weeks ago, didn't he? He talked about his first big contract at City. He got his first big contract and then he coasted. He admitted it. And, fair play to him for admitting that. A lot of players aren't honest enough to come out and do that. Do you think that that's a big problem with United at the moment? And do you think it's compounded by the fact that the captain isn't one, like a Keane? Keane, I mean, you would have had it under Bruce and Robson. Like, they would have told you in no uncertain terms when a performance wasn't good enough. But Maguire doesn't put across that message, does he, really? He just says, well, we'll go again next week. Everyone seems to talk up the performance when we can all see that they're not good enough.
Well, first of all, Maguire couldn't say that to other people because he has to be more concerned about his own game.
Yeah.
No one's got that belief in him anyway as a captain. They won't have. It's impossible to see him as your captain. He hasn't got that. He hasn't got that. He hasn't done the hard yards to be in that position. There's nothing about him that suggests he's a captain. He's a captain because of what his fee was. It's as simple as that. When we talk about players and like the likes of Martial, what they are to the club more than anything is they're a commodity. They become commodities within themselves. So they know their value is that much to the club because clubs don't want to lose out on them. That's why they get these people don't get new contracts now because clubs love them and want to keep them and build things around them. They get it because clubs are worried about their value in the marketplace. A lot of them. We know the ones with a value, but we know the ones who've got a value, got this kind of more value because of and they're looking at maybe thinking we might be able to get rid of them, but we want to make sure we don't want their contract to go too low. In the end, what do? You end up virtually giving them away because they're getting around. They're costing you a lot more money than what they should do around, and even worse is they're becoming a bad apple in the barrel. And that's what's happened with the modern day player. You got it. You always got it. It's always been around that player who's unhappy and moans about everything and wants to bring in his problems with the manager into the dressing room with the other players, looking for the other players to back him and question the manager. You know, United was the first proper dressing room I went into with a proper captain, a proper little small kind of committee around the captain, if someone was causing that kind of problem, off you go. Don't bring it in here. If your problem, go and sort it out of him. If not, if you don't want to do it with him because you're not brave enough, don't bring it here. We don't need it. And that's happened during my time at United. And it's gone. It goes away. But that issue isn't there anymore because they're all individuals. A lot of teams, individuals. They're not collective anymore and behind each other. And I think that's happening at United in a way, and it's happening at most clubs at Premier League. You listen to the Premier League now. Everything about the Premier League, all the things going on, games being called off. It all centres around too many games. So in football, too many games in the Premier League. So everyone's arguing about it. And I'm one of them because it's where I come from. I think about the people below. They've been doing that for years, for centuries, playing that amount of football. They get on with it because it's their job. They get on with it because the bonuses that are involved and the fact of the playing bonuses, the win bonuses, because they need them. They're not guaranteed. They're making sure they're guaranteed to pay their mortgages, to drive, to be able to pay for their cars. In the Premier League, if we're not playing the game. We won't buy a house this week. Then we leave that alone. We leave that until maybe next month. And everything's the wrong attitude at the moment. The Premier League, with the players, are slowly distancing themselves away from reality and real football fans, and it's becoming quite a kind of us against them scenario. And to be honest, I'm more Football League because, as far as I'm concerned, at the worst, I played with a lot of good Football League players who are maybe just as good as the players who are playing now. At the best of it, I'll say I played with great Football League players who are better all round than the players now. And I think, just quickly, Ian Rush never gets a mention when we talk about goal scorers. And he played in the Premier League, by the way, as you know. He was there in the early stages of it when it first started. And he played for Liverpool in that. Never gets a mention. Brian Robson doesn't get a mention as a Premier League player. Absolute disgrace what's happened to our football. And what happens is everyone grows into it. The players are into it. All the records we talk about now are Premier League, not football.
Yeah.
Premier League. Everything is about that. Scored so many. You think to yourself, well, that's embarrassing because everything is about. It's just so, and the players they're in there, and that's all they see. They've forgotten that bit of history, that bit that could make them better people. And that's the most important thing in football, is being a better person, and Gavin, and that makes you become a better person. You'll choose who you want around you, and at the moment it's all wrong. And Manchester United are in the wrong area. This kind of scenario that's happened with United happened to Liverpool when they were going through their moment. If you remember, the people, or the men, I should say, who thought they were an American band but white when they wore those suits at Wembley. They just absolutely it was just incredible that day at Wembley, 96, and they turned up in those suits, and that said what Liverpool had become. And never in a million years would you thought Liverpool would ever gone to that. All of us brought up with Liverpool winning this, and you see that and you go, there's a problem.
Yeah.
United have got to be careful because we're in that situation at the moment in time. Unless someone gets in there and cracks down on it, because what happens off the pitch, and it's an old adage, comes onto the pitch.
Yeah. Andy asks a question, Paul. How would you have reacted to Lingard and the West Ham photo antics. I'd be disappointed if he's anywhere near the squad tonight. Can't believe a player is showing this amount of disrespect to United. Now, this is interesting, Paul. I do want to get your point on this. Lingard, and we talked about this prior to Christmas, prior to Ollie being sacked, he put up this picture of him in a West Ham kit. And if you were being generous, you would say, well, he was just reposting. There's no big deal about it. Do you know what I mean? You could easily blow that one over and just say, it's upset a lot of people. Everyone was upset. There were a lot of people saying, this came on, obviously, straight after Solskjaer had talked about the contract and everything like that there'd been a breakdown in the contract. Everyone sort of knew, well, he's probably going to go then. And then Lingard was in the squad the next day against Watford and actually came on incredibly. Now, if you were to be generous and say, well, that was just, he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't think it would upset people. Blah, 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 blah. But now he knew that it did upset people the first time round. He knew that there was a reaction the first time he did it. Even if you think that you're all right to do it, you knew last time a lot of people were saying, oh, this is like when Paul Ince posted the picture of him in the United shirt. This is betrayal, blah, 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 blah. You just wouldn't do it the second time. Just out of respect for the fan base that supported you. That's where I am with this, because I thought, the first time round I'd be surprised if he plays again. And I was staggered that he did. But I didn't want to come straight out and go, oh, do you know what, that's unacceptable, because you don't know. It might have been an honest mistake. It might have just been a reposting of something. But the second time, because he knew what the outcry was the first time, what is he playing at? What would you have done, Paul? I mean, if someone did that a second time, and basically he's disrespecting all of you, isn't he?
Yeah. First of all, I haven't seen it. I saw something about it, and I thought to myself it was old news. Can you just quickly tell me what has he gone and done this time? Because
it's the same thing basically. So on Instagram, I know that you're getting used to it. I think West Ham tagged him in a goal celebration. This is back in November, the one that happened before Ole, and he shared that.
I remember that one.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. Basically, the same thing's happened over the last couple of days. So he's done exactly the same thing, knowing all of the criticism that came last time, and not just criticism, that people were genuinely upset by it. Like United fans are genuinely upset because they don't want to see a United player doing that, and he's gone and done it again. It's just
yeah. But the Paul Ince situation was about naivety, really, on his part, and every professional footballer's part at that given time, that era of football. So when you knew that you'd have a big move coming up, a photographer who you would generally know and trust would say, can I have a picture of you in this shirt? So they could be the first one, the moment the deal's done, to go, bang, we've got a picture in that shirt. Paul got let down.
Yeah.
Somehow somebody got hold of it and they pulled it out early. So Paul got let down. That wasn't Paul Ince being a big time Charlie or anything like that. He got mugged off by somebody.
Yeah.
Silly on his part. The person he's done it with, mostly trusted. But then he trusted somehow, maybe somebody infiltrated that photographer's library, found it, and then did that. Something like that's happened along. That wasn't Paul's fault directly. Paul's biggest problem was, in theory, having a picture done maybe 48 hours too early. But when you look at about Lingard, this has been Lingard's biggest problem. Now, he done great at West Ham. And as you know, I live in a big West Ham community. I've been going there quite a lot lately and doing a lot of games working there because my cousin's playing there quite regularly. All my mates all go there. And things are going good for him. And he's very reactive, I would say. He's Jesse Lingard. He's got somebody he's got people working for him. He's not doing it on his own. He's got a PR company, and they're using every moment. So there was a good moment for him to do the last one. West Ham have had 2 wins on the bounce, and he's gone in there again to do that. Look at, I'm here. He knows that West Ham fans liked him when he was here. That's an understatement because he made a massive difference.
Yeah.
Kind of, he was there and the ball started rolling. But he's got to remember now, they're doing okay now. But West Ham fans, because they've had it tough, and they're quite, as most fans are, they're quite bright. They're a little bit realism about it. He had an opportunity to come United didn't made a point of virtually saying they didn't want him because they sent him out on loan. United, I imagine David Moyes talked to him, but his objective was to come back to United within 24 hours. The first thing he does, he has a picture taken with Ronaldo. So there was a few West Ham fans and little things, and I'm on group chats of a football prediction thing I'm involved in, full of predominantly West Ham fans. There's 65 people on it, and they kind of little digs at him, and they're actually saying now to David Moyes, he didn't want to come last time. Nothing about him. Don't really want him back. A lot of them are saying, in that sense, he didn't want to come. No difference in certain ways because fans love their clubs. The difference is if you turn around and you ask for 24 hours, in my time to think about a move to Manchester United. No, you don't. We don't think you need 24 hours. It's Manchester United.
Yeah.
And so, as far as I'm concerned, he didn't want to play for him. He'd rather be around a bit what you were talking about, the Martial situation of being
exactly, yeah,
being this person at Manchester United and everyone talking about United or going to West Ham where you're going to have to work that bit harder. Everything's going to be a bit tougher. You're going to be 220 miles away from Manchester. The adulation you were getting from all the people in Manchester would be gone because you're in London. When you're in London, people will see you. They won't run up to you, and because it's a different thing down here, they won't run up to you. They'll see you. They might point, give you the eyes because they recognise you, and they'll carry on. And that's the difference. And so he's one of them at the moment. I think Jesse Lingard, who loves adulation. He loves what goes with it. Maybe so he should have prioritised his football first and foremost, because that's the bit that people will always remember you for, the bit that when you retire at such given time people want to talk about. I mean, I'm quite sure after a while people will stop talking about him on Instagram because he would have grown a little bit too old to be doing things on there, his TikTok and whatever going on. And he then, maybe after the time of his career, he'll look in the mirror and then he won't be blaming other people. He will be looking at himself and questioning maybe he should have got more game time in when it was offered to him and gone to a club, which is still always going to be guaranteed. It's going to get 60,000 people at every game. And where he would have been seen as a god because of what he'd done when he first arrived, maybe one of the best loan signings that West Ham have ever had. And he's gone and blown it by the way he's reacted after.
Yeah. Brings us on to just talk quickly about the January transfer window. Another question that we had right at the start of the show was from Victoria's Secrets about, do you think we can make top four if we don't strengthen the squad this month? It's going to be tougher to get top four with both Spurs and Arsenal in good form. Paul, obviously Rangnick's come out and he's basically said he's happy with the squad. If anything happens in business, you would think it's going to be outgoings. Martial already said he wants to leave. Pogba hasn't said anything, he never does, but you can read into... We all know he wants to go. Cavani looks like he's going to stay. Rangnick said that he's going to keep him around. Van der Beek, possibly you're not going to imagine that he's going to move in January. So the squad, more or less, probably Martial, Lingard, if there's anyone that's going to move on, perhaps Dean Henderson, because he's sort of voiced his opinion as well. Where do you stand on that? I mean, the question is, do you think we can make top four if we don't strengthen? I'll come in on that before I pass it on to you, Paul. I think we can. I think that the squad showed, maybe it's not second place in terms of the table that is strongest, because we can see that Liverpool and Chelsea are stronger than us. Well, we're closer to Chelsea than we are to Liverpool. But it doesn't matter that Arsenal and Spurs are in good form. If United play as good as they can do, and if they show the consistency that they did last season, in spite of not being particularly overwhelming, they should still have enough to get in the top four, right? I mean, that's a massive excuse for these players, if not, I mean, to say that they're not good enough to get in the top four, especially it's not like they're miles behind. If they win the games in hand, and I know you're absolutely right about that meaning nothing in theory, because you can easily lose those games, and United could easily lose them. I mean, it's not unfeasible to say that those games in hand, you lose against Brentford and draw against Brighton, so you're only gaining 1 point in that. I'm not being negative how pessimistic. I'm just being realistic. That's a situation that could happen to United. So the question, Paul, I'll just put it to you: do United have to strengthen to finish in the top four, or are they good enough to do that with the squad that they've got?
They have to strengthen, in my
Really?
opinion. Yeah, I believe that, and everyone's got their own opinions. I think they have to strengthen, given how they are at this moment in time. See the other night against Burnley, looked terrible defensively. Still no cohesion, at all. And that back line, he started with Bailly. Bailly still, as the saying goes, looks an accident waiting to happen. He does some incredible, just does. I'm going to come out and say he senses danger. He sees things, but even then, you think to yourself, he goes in and it's like one of them. It's all in. Everything he does, every challenge is all in. It's there, pushed out, do or die. His clearances, you think to yourself, Christ, he's going to take someone's head off the way he's kicking through. You just don't know what you're going to. But when it comes to making, defending, I don't think there's no better defender in that club. When you're on about someone out and out defending, here's your job to do. And he does it, but it's just the other bits. Again, he goes down injured, and you want him to stand up. Think about the time and think to yourself, how bad are you really? Do you think you played well, so you want to come off so you can, get a pat on the back and get applauded off because everyone think, I don't know why. I don't know why he does it. It's amazing how during that game as well, when that happened, the camera panned in on Mickey Phelan. And Mickey Phelan was going mad. I don't know, he wasn't happy about saying Mickey was standing by where the announcer stands. That bit down there, just down there by the entrance to the old dressing room tunnel. And he was just there. And I don't know whether or not he was having a go of the fact of Varane not being prepared or the fact of Bailly going down in the manner in which he went down and he was sitting down and he's kind of, you're doing something like you go down and the last thing you want is an injury. The last thing you want to do is come off the pitch with an injury, especially when you're winning. And it was just the way he was sitting there, and it was like virtually there and pina colada. I'm going off. It was, keep it cool. It was just strange, and I don't know. Then Varane comes on. Why, I think to myself then, does he fancy Varane, or did he want to look at Bailly? Because Varane was played in the game. You don't know. Harry Maguire, unsteady. Luke Shaw, nothing really changes. I'm not sure if he's fancied. There's so many questions to be asked about Manchester United. Wan-Bissaka looked terrible in certain bits. Looked terrible. I haven't said that about him before, and now I'm seeing it as a lad now who's been caught a little bit. It must be a Palace trait, maybe a little bit like Zaha when he comes to United. The club's too big. Everything on him is too much. Can't do it for that club. Can't do it. You put him back maybe into a Palace shirt or another club, and you'll mostly see maybe an incredible right back for that club, where expectations are not too much for him for what he's got to deliver. And it's no different to anyone else. If people wanted Paul Parker to come to Manchester United and be this all-out attacking fullback, sorry, they were going to be disappointed. If they wanted Paul Parker to come and be this defender who's going to win most tackles and give his best week in, week out, then there was a chance they were going to get that. And that's what it was. And the way the game is, the way the game's been turned by certain people, the manipulators, he's got to attack. And so he's put something which he can't relate to it is for Manchester United.
Yeah.
Somewhere else. I saw him do it for Palace, and I would say he was fine. He was a good right back. Yeah. He is a proper right back. So that's the stumbling block for United, what he's going to do defensively. That's where I think the changes are going to make. That's where I think he might go out and spend money, maybe on fullbacks. I don't know if he's a fan of Telles. I still don't believe he's a fan of Luke Shaw. I still don't believe he is a fan of Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw plays games in certain ways. Every time he likes one of his long runs with the ball, he makes the longest overlaps I've ever seen in my life. Needless. Sometimes, in fact, he cramped space when he overlaps instead of allowing someone to go 1-against-1. Doesn't need to do it. Just be there maybe for if he wants to turn around and come back, and then he can start play again, going out the other side of the park. So that's what you've got to be. You can't always overlap, you know. My excuse for not overlapping is that I had Andre in front of me most times, and I couldn't get past him. He was too quick. So that's my excuse anyway. So going back to it, I think they need a couple of different personnel, players who, for me, it's a bit like Conte, going out and getting the players who he knows, and then I think they're going to be German, who can play his system, who will know his system, and what they will do, they will then maybe put good habits into some of the players in the squad, because what happens is players react to new people coming in, and especially if they know they've got an association with the manager, they're not going to mug themselves off in front of them because they think to themselves, hold a minute, they could go and grass me up. They could be talking about me. So they will change their habits and try and equalise their habits. So look, we can, and that's the bit. They're the good things that could happen. Signings could lift people. Dare I say it? But you know what I'm going to say about a signing that makes a difference. Add something new, and that's it. It's not about winning the league this time, though. It's about guaranteeing qualifying for a Champions League. And it's making Manchester United sound like Arsenal. How everyone used to talk about Arsenal many moons ago, which in theory for Manchester United is embarrassing. But as we know, life is like, life goes round in circles, doesn't it, really? And
no, it does at United, and you're absolutely right. And it feels like it's going to be another of those tough games to get through against Wolves tonight. Some of the team news is saying Maguire might be absent. He was absent from the team at the team hotel, but it's a home game. You don't always have to report for them, so maybe he'll be part of the squad. But if not, then it's looking like the centre backs are going to be Jones and Varane because they're the only ones in the squad. So that will be very, very interesting to watch. You've already talked about Wolves and what a difficult game that's going to be, and how difficult they are to break down. Notoriously, every game that we've had against them has been difficult, so it's not going to be any different to that. To be honest, you're absolutely right in what you're saying about the standard of. It's such a strange thing for me, Paul, that we have in this conversation, and people might think, "Oh, you're being very kind to Solskjaer in this," because obviously things were going wrong, and it was what it was. The season was what it was, but at least with Solskjaer, there was everyone knew that the bar was set to challenge for the league, even though it was unrealistic with this squad. People were saying, and Solskjaer was building it up himself. He was saying, no, this is where we want to be. This is where we're challenging. And now he's gone. And there's a Champions League qualification again. It's like there's a comfort zone for these players yet again that, as long as we make the Champions League. And even that, some people are saying, oh, well, if they finish fifth because the Champions League looks a bit too far for them. Well, there's no reason why we're halfway through a season why they shouldn't be better than Arsenal or Spurs, because on paper, the squads are a lot better than Arsenal and Spurs. And my concern is not with the manager, it's always with the players. Have they got enough pride and self-respect in them? And I think this is a critical period for us as fans to learn this about them. Do they have the pride and self-respect? Because finishing fourth for United, Paul, which you never did, would be embarrassing for players of your era. It'd be purely embarrassing. It should be for these players when they were talked about it in the breath of title winners at the start of the season. Embarrassing to be doing what they're doing. I think I definitely would have, as a player, you would have felt it, and you would have felt major heat on the back of your neck as well from up above. But I do wonder if the players of today, if they really do feel it, if they really do get that. And listen, at the end of the day, football changes, life changes. Life has changed a little bit quicker than expected because of what's gone on. So things have moved on a little bit quicker. So we can only expect so much. People talk about passion. I think football, again at PL level, is losing that passion because it's becoming a little bit more like theatre. It's not real life anymore. Sooner or later we're going to have Anton Deck introducing Premier League football. That's the way it's going at this moment in time. They're going to be given tasks while they're playing the game of what they've got to do.
Why they, one dribble past 5 players and throw a slug down their throat before they shoot. If you want to watch real football, you got to go. You got to get outside the Premier League to find passion, really, where it means something still, because it's still working class. Premier League isn't working class anymore. It's a different way of life, to be perfectly honest, and it's a shame, but that's the way it is, and it's not something that I'm really, really enjoying. The thing that keeps me alive, really, and keeps me buzzing with the Premier League is the fact of wanting to see United get back and then looking at other people and seeing how they're reacting to it, because it's the last thing a lot of people want, really, at this moment in time.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, the one thing you can say is that Rangnick's form has been decent, if understated.
Wayne, it's just winning games, mate. And like I say to you, United are more than just winning games. If people just want to watch teams win games, drop down a few divisions, and there's a few teams in there can win games all the time and compete to get promotion. But if you're Manchester United, you're looking for performances to go with great performances with great wins. And that's what it should have been against Burnley. When you play Burnley, you beat them 4s at home and everyone goes, wow. Winning 1-0, 3 points, that's all that matters. Rubbish with Manchester United. Performances, they're the ones that makes people think. Arsenal's performance against Man City. Everyone's going, oh, Man City won and whatever. But people are looking at Arsenal's performance and saying, wow, that wasn't bad. And they didn't even win the game. People are still talking about the way they played it. Performances matter for the fans. They matter for the manager because he thrives on them. It's what he's been coaching all week to trying to implement to get out on the park. But more important for players. So when they go and play their next game and it's a big game, they're on top of the world. Their chests are out. They look down. They look at their thighs and they go, "Cool, they look good." There's a lot of energy in them, and their lung capacity gets bigger. That's what performances do. Just winning games means nothing.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And Paul, it's so refreshing, but also quite depressing when you speak with such passion about representing United, and you just know what if the players, if half of the players had the sort of passion for playing for a club that you do, then you'd have no problem, because they would know the responsibility that's and the privilege that they've got. Well, we'll see. Hopefully, we'll see something better than what we normally see against Wolves tonight. Paul and I will be back next week to discuss it. If you're watching live on YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe the channel. If you're listening back on the podcast, please leave us a nice review or rating on the platform you're listening on. We will be back next week. Stay safe, stay well. Thanks for listening and watching.